Today on Newsgirls, meet the Chief of Space Force Law.
We saw that President Trump signed an executive order to create an iron dome in space.
Do we see countries like trying to own parts of the moon or part of space at all?
Nobody can place nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction in orbit. Been a lot of tension though about traditional weapons.
Trump admins 70 lawsuits.
And this conversation is very timely because Trump truth socialed, "He who saves his country does not violate any law." Immigrants are being held at Guantánamo Bay, Camp 6, which is a prison building that's only held Al-Qaeda suspects.
And is color analysis real?
You've probably seen all over the web people talking about which color season they are. Ren and I are so lost and confused. We've had this conversation for, I'm not kidding, 2 years. Welcome to Newsgirls. I'm Wren.
And I'm Mabel.
Let's get into the stories. For humans living on Earth, there's almost nothing as objectively, universally cool as space.
From anchoring pop culture in books and movies to bringing people together to watch launches to stopping alien crime with Space Force.
Mabel, that's not what they do. What do they do, Wren? Okay, well, no one knows what they do. All we know is that it's a super classified branch of the Air Force. Their mission statement is secure our nation's interests in, from, and to space.
Well, then I guess it's good that today we're going to speak to the Chief of Space Law at Space Force, Aaron Brynildson, about all things outer space. He's also an active duty major in the U.S. Air Force and a space law professor.
A lot of Aaron's work is highly confidential, so we'll do our best to get as much insider intel as we can.
First off, really, excited to be here with you, Wren and Mabel. I'm just going to throw a disclaimer out there that anything that I talk about today with the two of you is just my personal viewpoints and not the viewpoints of the federal government.
So, Aaron, we saw that President Trump signed an executive order to create an iron dome in space. Can you explain what does that mean?
They're going to start funding research for space-based smaller cruise missiles to then hit nuclear weapons when they go through space. So it takes about 20 minutes for a Russian ICBM to, in theory, make its way to the United States. And a lot of that time is spent flying through space, actually. This future Iron Dome system to really be focused on trying to hit the warhead while it's in space.
Obviously, Elon Musk is now a part of the government, but also owns SpaceX. Do you think we'll see this blurring of the lines between public and private now that he's kind of in both sectors?
Yeah, it's interesting because he's like a special governmental employee. And you already saw Trump say that he wants to go to Mars pretty quickly.
We will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars.
Which is obviously Elon Musk's dream, and the sole reason that he created SpaceX was to eventually get to Mars. Starlink is, in a lot of ways, just a way to get profitable for them to meet that long-term vision. SpaceX was already winning the space race before this, so I don't know that there's much you could really tip the scales towards Elon Musk's enterprises.
Wow, and just to lay some groundwork for everybody listening, what laws govern outer space?
So the Constitution of the outer space is called the Outer Space Treaty. It really laid the foundation for both our U.S. policies, but international policies as well. It has over 100 signatures from the international community. The heart of it is the concept of free exploration and use of outer space. So nobody can own outer space. Nobody can own the moon. And then another key tenet is nobody can place nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction in orbit. There's been a lot of tension, though, about if you can place just traditional weapons in outer space.
And then during Trump's first term, he signed the Artemis Accords.
They are a unilateral statement by the United States to really, it's geared towards promoting the uses of the moon. So you're going to see in the next 10 years, there's different phases to the Artemis program. We're scouting new parts of the moon where it'd be the most advantageous area to go back. You might be able to see humans back on the moon in the next 5-10 years.
So, countries have obviously always fought over unexplored territory. We've seen that throughout history. Are we seeing that kind of being pushed a little? Do we see countries trying to own parts of the moon or part of space at all?
Yeah, there's definitely trending towards, to me, it's non-ownership ownership. It's this very nebulous concept of putting research facilities on the moon. The US also passed a federal statute saying that you can mine things on the moon and, in fact, own them. Really a controversial idea. Maybe we will someday be able to own, maybe not permanent territory on the moon, but certainly a lot of resources. There's certain helium gas, for example, that we don't have enough of here on the Earth, and it's in a unique form. I think in the next 10 to 20 years, it'll finally be economically viable.
So switching gears a little bit, the Russia-Ukraine war is actually being called the first commercial space war
ever. Can you kind of explain that? Why is it being called that?
I think a lot about AI combined with space imagery helps you predict troop movements. So what Palantir does, they ingest large amounts of satellite imagery, predict movements based on the revisit rate of these satellites. So in some instances, you have a revisit hourly to see where things are moving. And then they use algorithms to determine where they think things are headed next. You can also use algorithms to identify different types of weapons. It might be a tank or it might be a truck. The algorithm will help you better analyze, the numbers of forces in certain areas and what type of weaponry they have. It's a 2-for-1 loss ratio where for every 2 Russians, they're losing 1 Ukrainian. That doesn't happen without some sort of technological advantage.
So another issue we've heard in space is that it's getting kind of congested, which sounds like a crazy idea to us who are based on land. But what are some of the issues that would come about from space being congested, and how do we solve them?
So in the last 10 years, you've seen exponential growth from satellites on orbit. Over half of the satellites on orbit today are Starlink satellites. SpaceX and Starlink as a company alone are now bigger in terms of satellites on orbit than most countries are.
Wow.
And so you're talking about thousands of satellites, and they've talked about having a mega constellation in the tens of thousands is the ultimate goal. And so you're going to see some space traffic management issues as we continue to see these constellations go up. We've only had a handful of on-orbit collisions in the last 30 years, but I think you're going to see more of that as we put more things in space. But space debris is going to become a concern as we get more congested, and satellites die on orbit too. So we can lose communications with them and not be able to maneuver them. So in theory, you could have them crash into each other just because we can't move things out of the way.
And they'll just be like floating around after they're...
Yeah.
Okay.
But they slowly deorbit just naturally because of gravity. But
Okay.
you're going to see more commercial efforts to do debris mitigation. So there's companies now that are looking at sending satellites into orbit with arms on them or nets or, engineering tactics to try to grab the satellites and bring them down or bring them up to a different orbit.
And what are the dangers of having the debris orbiting the Earth?
Yeah, there's something called the Kessler syndrome, which is that debris gets generated exponentially. So as things smash into each other, more things smash into each other, which leads to, in theory, a total loss of certain types of orbits for, commercial or military uses as debris becomes unpredictable. That's the fear. The long-term fear is we could ruin space for decades if we don't take care of it.
We saw that the DoD put out a report on China's anti-satellite missiles, some of which have, like you had mentioned, robotic arms that could be used to grapple with enemy space hardware. So you obviously mentioned that this robotic arms would help clean up debris, but I guess it could be used for more nefarious purposes.
Definitely. So anything in space, for the most part, has a dual use. So when you're thinking, so here's a robotic arm to remove debris or to get rid of something, it can also be used then offensively to grab hold of one of our valuable satellites in space that we use for national security purposes. How do you know when something is going to be used for a military application versus just a normal civil or commercial application? That was a kind of a wake-up moment for the Space Force when they demonstrated that technology, and it's not a technology that we had.
And so there's so much money being poured into space technology right now. What are the emerging technologies that we probably don't know about that you're most excited about?
One of the ones that I'm most fascinated by is commercial space stations. So today we obviously have the International Space Station. The lifespan of that is we're coming up on it no longer being usable. There's a company called Vast Space, which is looking to launch a commercial space station here in the next few years, capability to house our own scientific experiments. I also fascinated generally with satellite to cell phone services. There's a company, AST Space, which is just recently tested out using their satellites to do a FaceTime call from using a satellite. So we're not talking about a cell phone tower anymore. You just have a completely ubiquitous cell service using satellites. So no more dead zones. You can go out hiking in the middle of the woods and have 4 bars, and it can do this all without any kind of updates to your existing iPhone, for example.
When can we see that?
5 years from now, we're probably all going to get cell service from space. So
Cool.
Really big growth opportunity. I don't know how much we'll continue to build on Earth cell towers.
So Aaron, before we let you go,
Yeah,
would be remiss if we don't ask you the question on everyone's mind.
about aliens.
Yeah.
I tend to think there are not aliens, but I think that mystery, that overclassification, drives a lot of people to speculate about what is on orbit. You saw former Air Force officers talking about special access programs that they were told about and that there were aliens out there. I think I'd go back to the fact that if something was classified, you wouldn't be able to talk about it. So it would be a federal crime in order to release that information.
Yeah.
And I don't think whistleblower protections would protect somebody from bringing forth that kind of information. Also, that individual said that other people came to him and told him about these special access programs existing, which again would be another form of a violation of federal law. It would be a lot of people willing to risk years in prison to really bring the story to life.
But with that, even if you did know, you wouldn't be able to tell us.
That's true, yeah.
So last week, we took a look at some of Trump's recent actions and executive orders and just examined whether what he was doing was legal or not. And there was just so much to get into, we decided to make a part 2.
And as of this week, 26 of Trump's orders have been paused by the courts, indicating judges are at least partially sympathetic to the plaintiffs, and experts expect many of these cases will end up in front of the Supreme Court in the months to come.
And this conversation is very timely because last Saturday, Trump truth socialed, "He who saves his country does not violate any law," which is an homage to Napoleon, who is obviously the Emperor of France. And this was reposted by the White House X account and is very indicative of the way that Trump and his administration are planning to run the country.
Yeah, Senator Adam Schiff replied, "Spoken like a true dictator." But poking holes in judicial power is clearly a strategy, since J.D. Vance went viral last week for tweeting, "If a judge tried to tell a general how to conduct a military operation, that would be illegal. If a judge tried to command the attorney general how to use his or her discretion as a prosecutor, that's also illegal. Judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power."
Which is interesting because even Republicans are urging Trump to respect court rulings. Trump himself has obviously complained about all the lawsuits and is going to be doing a lot of appealing because over 70 lawsuits have been filed against him. So let's get into them.
The CDC and FDA have taken down web pages with any references to race, gender identity, or sexual orientation to comply with President Trump's executive order barring gender ideology extremism.
Yeah, the CDC took down online information about environmental justice, HIV treatments, fertility clinics, and recruiting diverse populations for clinical trials. At a hearing recently, doctors actually complained that guidance for treating specific diseases, including STDs, also went missing.
So a doctor who works at a clinic serving low-income communities in Chicago said in a declaration filed in court that she can't access the CDC resources she would normally use to combat a chlamydia outbreak in a high school by stepping up testing.
And then the FDA actually removed pages recommending the inclusion of more women in underrepresented groups in clinical trials, according to the lawsuit.
So the left-leaning advocacy group Doctors for America are suing the Trump administration, saying that these deletions put everyday Americans and most acutely underprivileged Americans in jeopardy.
So the plaintiffs claim that taking down the information violates the Administrative Procedure Act and will actually slow down medical research, and it grants U.S. federal courts, not the executive branch, oversight over all agency actions.
Well, a federal judge sided with them and ordered these websites to be restored. Agencies had likely not engaged in a reasoned decision-making process, aka no valid reason to take them down beyond Trump's war on woke.
Which makes taking down these sites illegal. And speaking of Trump's war on woke, did you see that the Department of Defense actually banned Julianne Moore's children's book, Freckle-Faced Strawberry, from schools serving military families?
That's so weird, I guess, because it's about inclusion, but it's literally about learning to love your freckles, and the main character is 7.
She was just like everybody else, except for one thing. She had red hair. And something worse. Freckles.
Apparently, the DoD is conducting a review on all learning materials to make sure that they're in line with Trump's orders on racial indoctrination.
Last week, the Trump administration sent Ukraine a proposal requesting it hand over 50% of its mineral resources as a way to compensate for past and future U.S. military and economic aid.
We're telling Ukraine they have very valuable rare earth. We want to guarantee. We're handing them money hand over fist. We're giving them equipment. European is not keeping up with us. They should equalize. And look, we have an ocean in between. They don't. It's more important for them than it is for us.
And Ukraine has some of the largest reserves of like titanium and iron ore, lithium, and other rare earth minerals that are obviously used to make EVs, cell phones, even cancer treatments. And currently, the US has been getting all of these minerals mostly from China. But obviously, the Trump administration wants to reduce its dependence on trade with China.
In interviews, Trump has estimated their reserves are worth anywhere from $500 million to $500 billion.
That's a big range.
A senior Ukrainian official called the ask colonial in scale. But even though Zelensky rejected Trump's 50% proposal, this one is legal. Apparently, Zelensky's working on a counter-proposal that would still offer the U.S. access to the country's natural resources, but would also bolster U.S. security guarantees for Ukraine.
Next up, the Trump administration fired the head of the Office of the Special Counsel, Hampton Dellinger, in a one-sentence email earlier this month.
He was only appointed during Biden's presidency, so his term doesn't expire until 2029. And if you, like us, didn't know what the Office of the Special Counsel does, it guards federal workers from illegal actions such as retaliation for whistleblowing.
And Dellinger says that his termination is illegal because it violates a law that basically shields the leaders of independent agencies from removal by the president, except, quote, in cases of neglect of duty, malfeasance, or inefficiency. So Dellinger is actually suing the Trump administration, and so far, an appeals court rejected Trump's request to fire him.
And to fight back, Trump asked the Supreme Court to step in with emergency action, which is the first time he's appealed to them in his efforts to seize greater control of federal power.
So as of now, this is illegal.
And a federal judge in D.C. issued a temporary order allowing Dellinger to keep his position as the case proceeds.
But on the other hand, to just kind of give the other perspective, the acting Solicitor General, who actually represents the government side in front of the Supreme Court, said irreparably harmed the presidency by curtailing the president's ability to manage the executive branch in the earliest days of his administration. So those are the two arguments that are being weighed.
Well, I'm sure we've all heard that immigrants are being held at Guantánamo Bay. So far, nearly 100 men have been sent there. And Trump said he's only moving dangerous criminals, the worst of the worst, and alleged members of a violent Venezuelan gang.
We have 30,000 beds in Guantánamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people. Some of them are so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them, because we don't want them coming back, so we're going to send them out to Guantánamo.
But CBS and other outlets have reported that the administration is also sending nonviolent, low-risk migrant detainees who have no serious criminal records or any at all. But Homeland Security said that all of these people were considered to have committed a crime by entering the U.S. illegally. But there's obviously a difference between doing that and being a violent gang member.
And while a detention space for 30,000 migrants is under construction, some suspected gang members are being housed in Camp 6, which is a prison building that's only held Al-Qaeda suspects. And they're being guarded by soldiers instead of immigration officers.
And so that really makes the question, is this legal critical? Because some legal experts are saying that the Trump administration is breaking the law by denying some migrants access to legal counsel and holding them in a, quote, legal black hole. So information on their identities and how long they're being kept in Guantánamo or evidence of their crimes haven't been released yet.
Well, the ACLU has brought a lawsuit saying when detained in the United States, immigrant detainees have the right to access counsel. This is the normal ICE lack of transparency on steroids. Furthermore, legal experts say even if the migrants are confirmed as members of this Venezuelan gang, they still do not qualify to be held in Camp 6, which has been described as a tomb above ground.
So is sending migrants to Guantánamo illegal? Inconclusive. But is preventing them from legal counsel illegal? Yes. And this will be like an ongoing situation to watch, but the latest is that a federal judge approved the blocking of 3 men that were detained in El Paso to be transferred to Guantánamo after lawyers said that they were falsely affiliated with gangs.
Finally, Trump has ordered trans women to be transferred to men's prisons and end their gender-affirming care. This applies to the 16 transgender women currently housed in federal women's prisons.
It's kind of crazy that this order was issued in Trump's first month and it only applies to 16 people. It just shows how much of a priority this is for this administration. So 3 transgender women actually brought this suit to DC and argued that they would face violence and sexual assault in men's prisons. And they say that that would violate their 8th Amendment right to not be subjected to cruel and unusual punishment.
As a rebuttal to that, the U.S. Justice Department argued that the Bureau of Prisons has broad authority to make inmate placement decisions, But a U.S. district judge has sided with the trans prisoners and temporarily paused any trans women from being moved to men's prisons.
And this seems to be a continuation of the Trump administration's trans erasure. As we've mentioned on the show, on his first day as president, Trump declared that there are only 2 genders identified at birth. And since then, the administration has even rid mentions of the T in LGBTQ on government sites.
So is this legal? Well, we hate to leave you guys hanging, but it's kind of inconclusive. It'll come down to whether the judge views potential violence or sexual assault as cruel and unusual punishment. Once again, we ran out of time for everything Trump's been sued for, like NIH funding cuts or birthright citizenship or Doge's latest layoff scandal or so many more.
And last week we discussed why Trump is doing so much so fast. It's only been like a month since he's been president. Well, another proposed lens to see all of this through is that this could be a strategy to overwhelm his opposition. So the executive branch obviously has the ability for like swift, aggressive action. We see that with Trump's seemingly endless orders, but the judicial branch is slow by design. So legal opposition might not be able to keep up with like the speed and pace of Trump. So we might see some hard to win cases slip through the cracks. Are you a true spring or a bright winter? Apparently finding out what colors look best on you is a lot more convoluted than you might think.
You've probably seen all over the web people talking about which color season they are or getting their colors done.
For you, rather than lighter ones, I like the darker ones better. They sharpen your jawline and also they make your face features more stand out.
You've a very sophisticated eye.
It's really good too. I told you you have a strong influence between the summer and the winter.
Okay. But did you notice how it pulls a little yellow? Yeah. Instantly from your skin?
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
It's so interesting.
So like you have your cool palettes
and the warm.
And your warm palette.
The process examines a person's skin, undertone, eyes, hair, kind of just everything to give them like the best palette that would suit them. And it offers 4 seasonal palettes that draw from colors present in nature at that time of year. So there's like rich golds and browns for autumn, icy blues and whites for winter, soft pastels for summer, and bright corals and greens for spring.
And this idea of color seasons became popularized in part by Carol Jackson's best-selling book, Color Me Beautiful from 1980. And she argues that a person's season could be determined by the colors that made them look the perkiest, the most vibrant, most alive, while the wrong colors can really wash you out.
And this can be a very confusing process, so people actually go and get their colors done by a professional, which in the US can cost between $150 to $500. And what they do is like drape different colored fabrics around you to see what like makes you look the best.
So winter and summer are cool toned and spring and autumn are warm toned. And that always gives me pause because I always think summer should be warm tone. And within each season, there are also 3 sub-seasons that further narrow down the palette.
Yes, so the first step in your color analysis season journey is to find out your undertone, and we can help you with that. So there's some different ways to do this, like seeing if you look better in gold jewelry, you're warm, and if you look better in silver, you're cool toned. Or this is kind of cool, like you can hold a white cloth or piece of paper up to your face, and if your skin looks more yellow compared to the paper, you're warm toned, and if you pull more pink, that means you're cool toned.
And then they say if you tan easily and rarely burn, you're likely warm toned, but if you burn easily and don't tan much, you're probably cool toned. But that one isn't exact science because I feel like I know people with cool undertones who get really tan.
There are actually also TikTok filters to help you like identify your season, but that just confused me even more.
Well, even if you don't know your season, I think we all can recognize when some colors look really good on us and others like really don't.
Yeah, that's true. Like I can't pull off like a really pale mint green. So I know that I have to opt for like a deeper olive green.
That's because I think you're an autumn.
Wren and I are so lost and confused. We've had this conversation for, I'm not kidding, 2 years. And just last week, we discovered that I was probably an autumn.
But at least we know what you probably are. Like, we really don't know what I am.
I think you're either a spring or a winter, but this is why we need the professionals. So we are speaking with Riley, the senior color analyst at Lily's Color Lab in New York City.
So when I drape you with this, I'm just assessing the skin around your eyes, your mouth, the actual color of your lips, and your features overall to see positive changes or negative changes.
Okay.
So we have cool tone colors here, neutral colors here, and then as we go, the colors get warmer towards the back.
Okay.
So the first thing that I notice between these options is here in the neutral, you have this nice neutral skin tone. When I switch to the cool tone drape, I think something that's extremely cool tone like this brings out a little bit of gray underneath your eyes here.
Yeah.
Where you can see that goes away in the neutral drape.
That's true.
So then as you go to the warm colors, we have that strong yellow base. What you notice is the surface of your skin starts to pull a little bit green.
Yeah.
And that's because you have a subtle blue base to your skin that's mixing with the yellow of this drape. I'd say you're much closer to that neutral area. In your case, since you have a neutral undertone, then I switch to dark versus light. And then once I know that step, I can figure out, are you leaning winter, autumn, or spring, summer? I could kind of figure out that you were leaning dark based off of the neutrals that we looked at, but this is one drape that I would use to help a client see if they lean dark or light. So these colors, we have warmer tones on the left side, cooler tones on the right side. But if I drape you with this palette, and kind of imagine you built an outfit with all of these dark colors, this wouldn't look overwhelming on you at all. You notice your under eye area is still very bright, your jawline's defined, everything looks very balanced about this. But if I switch you to just light colors, suddenly you look very washed out in comparison, right?
Does not work. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you wouldn't be something like a spring or a summer because this is kind of what their palette would look like.
Okay.
Wow.
That would put you in this left half of the palette, winter or autumn.
Okay, cool.
Okay, we're down to 2.
Bright versus soft colors. This is something that's really important when you're looking at people who have dark features or dark eyes like yourself. Dark eyes aren't always just dark and soft. A lot of people have dark eyes that classify as bright. So bright versus soft is really important in understanding somebody's season. So we've got bright colors here, which are just pure hues. They're not, affected by anything. And then we have soft colors, which have some gray mixed in. I do find that this is too intense. In general, just draws the attention away from the face.
Yeah.
Whereas here, the cool bright side draws attention to your face, especially these 2 colors here.
Oh my god, am I cool toned kind of?
I think you might be cool toned.
Red, this is crazy. This is changing everything.
Yeah. And so when we look at the bright colors, I could see bright and cool working for you. Your skin looks very smooth here. When I switch to warm and soft, it's kind of causing a little bit of dullness in your skin, especially in the center part of your face.
Oh my god, wow.
This is going to be a colossal change.
For both of us,
we were not prepared for that.
And then we have contrast. I mentioned we're looking at that color difference between your hair, skin, and eyes. So that is seen on a value scale. So your hair is pretty dark. I would say it's just this end level. Your eyes are pretty dark as well, and your skin is around medium, maybe leaning light, depending on how tan you are throughout the year. So based on just your hair, skin, and eye color, I would say that you're about a medium contrast, but this is where it's really important to factor in the intensity of your features. So we've got low contrast light, and so this is going to be too underwhelming for your features. If I switch to low contrast dark, even though you're not low contrast, dark colors suit you. But I would say that your best is the high contrast. This is what immediately brings attention to your eyes because your eyes have this level of intensity and brightness to them.
Oh.
So autumn does have 3 subseasons. There's soft autumn, which I think overall is too light. There's not as much contrasting colors in here as I would like.
Yeah.
There's warm autumn, which is far too warm. Your skin starts to go a little green here, especially around your lips. And then we have dark autumn. Now, initially I was thinking that this could be a good palette for you, and I still think that the reds look great, everything on the left side looks great, but I'm not sure about this right side. It doesn't seem to be bright enough. So let's take a look at winter.
That was our prediction. We thought I was
autumn.
Like a deep autumn. Or,
yes.
Yeah, that's what we
That's
thought.
what we were expecting.
Yeah.
Now we're in uncharted territory.
I don't know where to go from here.
Yeah.
Emotionally.
So then we have the 3 subseasons of winter. And bright winter is going to be a little too bright. These colors you can also see start to get a little bit light on the left side. When we look at true winter, also known as cool winter, this palette starts to work a little bit better because of those dark colors, but we still have the yellow on the left, which is too bright, and I would say these colors, which are too light. So looking at dark winter, we have kind of this go between dark winter and dark autumn. So I'm going to do one last check between the 2 because I wouldn't say that you're one of the main seasons. I would say that you're actually one of the transitions. And the major difference between these 2 is we have gold versus orange on this palette. And I will say, I think you look very bright in winter. When we look at the winter palette, you have this really even skin tone, your under eye looks bright, and overall the 3 sections of your face, the area under your eye, the cheek, and the area around your mouth, they're all uniform in color. When I switch to the autumn option, I notice the area around your lips and your under eyes goes a little gray in comparison.
Wow, so I'm a winter.
Yep, you are a winter.
That was the last thing we were expecting.
This is like the shock of the century. Like, oh my god.
Oh my god.
Like in your case, you can actually see a good amount of green in your eyes.
Yeah.
So that could, at first glance, bring you maybe like closer to neutral, maybe even warm. So it's not the case that people with light skin and light eyes are always a cool tone season. That's something that I commonly hear.
Oh, interesting.
I definitely, from this, know that we're just going to be looking at lighter colors. So we've got our cool tone colors here. Your skin looks very bright. Switching to the neutral, I see your lip color pops a little bit more here, and so does the green in your eyes. But then when we get to warm, the orange is kind of overtaking your skin, causing a bit of an orange film over your skin. So I would say neutral. I don't know which way you could lean yet. Maybe a little cool, maybe a little bit warm, but you're also in that neutral category.
Wow.
Hey.
Both neutrals.
So we've got our palette of dark colors here, and even though you could pick out one of these, especially this middle one, and you could know that that's a really nice color on you, if you were imagining wearing an outfit full of these dark colors, it would start to look a little too heavy, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to show through shadowing in the outer corners of the eyes and maybe the outer corners of the lips here. Whereas in the light colors, the ones that do suit you, you notice a lot less shadowing in your face overall. Your features get a lot brighter and lighter. Now, I'm not sure if you're like a pastel palette, but in general, I would say you lean a little bit lighter. So we've got our bright colors here. I'm still gravitating towards a lot of these types of tones, and it's just because it matches your eyes, you know?
Yes.
So I do like some bright colors on you. When we switch to a soft and muted palette, especially the soft and muted warm tone colors, these are going to be a little bit heavy and slightly dull on you. Your features do read as a lot brighter. When I get to this summer palette side, I do think that the lightness of the colors gets rid of some of the shadowing on your face, but I would say your eyes stand out the most to me in something like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your palette is kind of in between. It's not going to be just soft colors or just bright colors. So for you, we saw you have that neutral undertone. You have a little bit more of that in between soft and bright, but we do know that you lean light. These are cool tones. I do think because of your green eyes and the fact that the warm, bright colors brought you out, I'm just going to use this drape on the warm side to see how we like it. But we have low contrast light, and when I look at this palette on you, you notice you still have a lot of color to your lips. You still have a nice defined jawline. Your eyes stand out, and so I wouldn't say that this is falling flat on you. When we look at high contrast, though, this seems to be a little bit too bold for your features. It's pulling my attention away from your eyes and down towards the drape. So for you, we're going to take a look at the spring and the summer palettes.
Makes sense.
We'll start with the light summer. And so with light summer, you can kind of see here how these greens, even though they're a little bit cooler tone, they have a bit of that blue base, they do bring out your eyes pretty well. So I do like the light summer. I'll keep that in mind. We have soft summer, and we have cool summer. So cool summer I think is way too cool tone. Okay, moving on to spring. We have bright spring, which is a very, very high contrast palette. You can kind of see that right away. I do like the two pinks underneath your chin, but the lime green is pulling my attention away. So I wouldn't say that you are on the brighter end of spring. I do like this type of pastel palette on you.
Yeah, that looks nice.
That looks great. And I also like that the warmth brings out a little bit of this peachy tone that you have to your skin. Because I wouldn't say that your skin leans very pink or very red.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then we have right in the middle, the warm spring palette. Now this here, I still think is a little bit too bright. Let me do another comparison here between spring and summer. And I do think that you have a little bit of warmth visible in your skin. So I have a little bit of that lean towards the spring palette for you.
That's what we thought.
You thought spring?
We thought spring. Yes. I just thought that Wren would have like a I think it's because it's the colors that she wears, like a brighter palette.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised that they're kind of like softer and pastel-y. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I see it.
And the Light Spring palette, the way it's represented on these drapes is much softer than it actually is. For example, the Light Spring, you'll have pastels, but you also will have something like a hibiscus red, a bright coral pink, that type of thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
It's all making sense.
Those are like my favorite tools. So we just got our colors done. I think one of us is taking it harder.
I like don't know what to do with myself. This is weird. As you can tell, we shot everything in the studio prior to going to getting our colors done. So when we thought for sure I was in autumn, we were wrong. Wren got what we thought she was gonna get. A little bit more like pastel, like more muted than I thought.
Me too. Yeah. I'm gonna have to look at pastels. I mean, I guess I really do love pastels. I just don't wear them as much apparently as I should.
Wow, this is crazy. She also told, like, so Wren and I are both neutrals, but Wren is light and I'm dark, so we're like
yin yang.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're gonna go like reassess everything.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, actually, I'm okay. But as an empathetic friend, I'm processing this with Mabel.
Yeah, we're processing this together forever.
Don't trust us if we have told you what we think your colors are. Thanks for coming along on this journey, people. Get your colors done. It's really fun.
It's really necessary.
It's fun and only 50% chance of instilling a mental breakdown.
And go with a friend for emotional support.
Bye.